We've all seen the stories: towering castles, noble knights, grand feasts, and royal families living in luxury. It's a setting that feels straight out of a fantasy novel or a historical drama. But peel back the curtain, and the truth is far less romantic. Living in a medieval castle wasn't about elegance or comfort. It was about survival. Behind those thick stone walls were cold nights, brutal work, poor hygiene, and constant fear of war, betrayal, and disease. The castle might have looked powerful on the outside, but life inside was far from ideal. Number 1, the harsh reality of castle life. When most people think of medieval castles, they picture towering stone walls, grand halls, and a life of nobility filled with feasts and luxury. But this image couldn't be further from the truth for the majority of people who lived inside them. Castles were designed first and foremost as military fortresses, built to withstand sieges, repel invaders, and project the power of whoever ruled within. Comfort, warmth, and hygiene were far down the list of priorities. Inside the castle, life was cold, literally. The walls, often several feet thick, were made of stone that absorbed the chill during winter and trapped heat during the summer. In the colder months, those stones radiated freezing air into every corner of the castle. There was no insulation, no glass windows, and no central heating. A single fireplace might exist in a room the size of a modern gymnasium, but its heat barely made a dent. Most residents relied on heavy woolen clothes, cloaks, and furs, which were rarely washed to stay warm. And even the nobility, with access to slightly better rooms and more servants, weren't spared from the cold drafts that swept through every hallway and chamber. The castle floors were usually stone or packed earth, and rugs or rushes were laid down not for comfort, but to soak up spills, mud, and waste. These rushes were changed infrequently and often became homes for insects and rodents. In some areas, people tossed scraps, bones, and food waste onto the floor where dogs might scavenge or it would simply decay. The smell inside a castle was a mix of smoke from cooking fires, human sweat, chamber pot contents, unwashed bodies, rotting food, and animals kept inside the walls for safety. Hygiene was almost non-existent by modern standards. There were no flush toilets or sewer systems. Instead, waste was dumped into moats, cesspits, or even thrown out of windows. Latrines, if available, were crude and often located over open pits. Many castles had garderobes, small toilet rooms with holes cut into stone slabs, placed high up on the outer walls so that waste would fall directly into a ditch or stream below. But these were usually reserved for the higher-ranking residents. The lower classes used buckets or simply relieved themselves wherever they could. Because of these practices, disease was rampant. Contaminated water supplies were a regular cause of outbreaks. People rarely bathed, partly because of the cold and partly due to beliefs that too much bathing could make you sick. Instead, they might wash their hands and face occasionally, and clothes were worn repeatedly until visibly soiled or infested with lice. Rats and fleas thrived in these environments, contributing to the spread of deadly diseases like the Black Death. In such close quarters, illnesses spread quickly, and medical help, when available, was based more on superstition than science. In truth, life in a medieval castle was a daily struggle against the elements, poor hygiene, and the constant threat of illness. For most residents, it was far from the romanticized life of kings and queens. It was about surviving from one harsh season to the next. Number 2, behind the fortress, construction and labor. Building a medieval castle was never just about stacking stones. It was a massive, high-risk project that demanded time, money, resources, and a relentless workforce. It often began with a basic motte and bailey design, where a wooden fort stood atop an artificial mound, the motte, surrounded by a walled courtyard, the bailey. This structure was only temporary. Once resources were secured and the region stabilized, construction shifted to stone, both for better durability and stronger defense. Stone, especially limestone, was the material of choice for most major castles, but obtaining it wasn't easy. Quarrying involved back-breaking labor with basic tools, chisels, hammers, wedges, used to extract massive blocks. These stones then had to be shaped by stonemasons on site, often under extreme weather conditions. Transporting them was a logistical nightmare. Oxen pulled heavy carts across muddy roads, through forests, and over hills. It could take days to move a single load. Bad weather or broken equipment often caused long delays. The labor force behind a castle's construction was diverse. Stonemasons were the stars of the operation, known for their precision and skill. Carpenters built scaffolding, hoisting systems, and temporary housing for workers. Blacksmiths forged nails, hinges, and tools needed on site. There were also unskilled laborers, dozens, sometimes hundreds, who carried stones, mixed mortar, and did the dirtiest jobs. These workers usually lived in makeshift wooden huts near the construction site, often in harsh and unsanitary conditions. Injuries were common, and fatalities weren't rare. A castle like Rochester Castle in England stands as a prime example of this effort. Built to resist Norman attacks, it had 4-meter-thick walls and a central keep designed to withstand siege engines. That level of defensive power came with a high price in human effort. Construction would go on for years, sometimes even outlasting the original patron who ordered it. And finishing the outer walls wasn't the end of the work. Castles required constant maintenance. Roofs leaked, walls eroded, and wooden structures decayed. Permanent staff were kept on site for repairs. Craftsmen, carpenters, masons, and even chimney sweeps. Every storm, every siege, every decade brought new problems to solve. Fire was a constant risk too, especially with the heavy use of open flames and wooden interiors. Once a section was damaged, entire crews were mobilized to restore it before it became a security weakness. In many ways, a castle was like a living machine. Without continuous labor, it would fall apart. The glamour we associate with castles today comes with the assumption that they were solid and eternal. But in reality, they were high-maintenance fortresses requiring constant human effort. From the early wooden prototypes to massive stone citadels, each castle was the product of sacrifice, of money, time, and most of all, people. Number 3. Power and politics inside the walls. Medieval castles were more than just defensive strongholds. They were the nerve centers of political control. The lord of the castle acted as both ruler and judge, overseeing the local population, resolving disputes, collecting taxes, and ensuring loyalty to the crown. His power was visible not only in military might, but in how he used the castle as a stage for political maneuvering. At the heart of the castle's political life was the Great Hall. This was the symbolic and practical center of authority. Lavish banquets might have been held there, but more often it was where law was dispensed and alliances were made or broken. Local lords, knights, and sometimes even foreign dignitaries would gather to witness charters being signed, oaths being sworn, and judgments handed down. The Great Hall projected order and legitimacy. It was carefully designed to impress and intimidate. Power politics inside the castle didn't stop at diplomacy or ceremony. Marriages were powerful tools. A well-planned union could merge territories, strengthen dynasties, and end decades-long rivalries. Nobility used marriage as a calculated move. Children, often no older than 10, were betrothed to secure future alliances. These weren't personal decisions. They were political strategies orchestrated by families or even kings. Women, especially noble women, played a central role in these arrangements. Their status and lands made them valuable pawns, but also powerful players if they navigated the system skillfully. But for every public alliance, there was private tension. The walls of medieval castles often concealed secrets, plots, betrayals, and whispered deals. Hidden staircases, secret tunnels, and listening holes weren't just architectural quirks. They were essential tools in a world where knowing your enemy's plans could mean the difference between power and downfall. Servants who moved silently through the halls were often the ears of their masters. Information was currency. Lords kept informants not only outside the castle but inside as well, spying on their own guests and even their own families. Treachery was not uncommon. A nobleman could fall from grace overnight. A whispered rumor about disloyalty, real or fabricated, could lead to public disgrace, imprisonment, or execution. Even kings and queens weren't safe. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most influential women in medieval Europe, learned this the hard way. After supporting her sons in a rebellion against her husband, King Henry II of England,